So today I'm going to talk to you about how to create the first layer for the Liquorice Allsorts image. Now this image is created using watercolours and the red tin. Now for the base of the colours that you'll use all of them from the red tin, and then you can heighten the colours with the ink palettes and also pencil crayons. The very first step is to create what we call the colour swatches, and the first thing you'll do is you'll look at each of the colours within the Liquorice Allsorts, and that's on the candy section of the Allsorts, and you'll map out your dark, medium and light tones. So the first colour we can see is the pink, and you'll use this pinky red in the palette, and you'll add water to your brush, roll your brush into the ink, and then just create your first swatch. Now the next swatch will be medium, so add a touch of water and then just add the paintbrush to the paper, but don't add any more ink, and again a touch of water to create your light tone, and you'll see that you'll create gradual tones. The next colour is green, so start off with the lighter green, so again rolling your clean brush into the green to create your darkest tone. For this one, try experimenting without adding any more water to see if you can get your gradual tones, and you'll notice that those work really well and you don't have lots of excess water. Within the suite you'll notice that there are two shades of green, so experiment with both of them. And remember, we call these tonal jigsaw pieces because this is you separating the tones that will eventually be placed back together to form a realistic image. And just experiment with what the colours look like as a dark tone, a medium tone and a light tone, so that you can work out your range of tones. The next colour is grey, but within the grey you can see some blue tones, and you can also see some ranges of different grey. So just experiment with the blue tone, which is more like a teal colour. Again, just water this down just to see how light you can get it. And then next experiment with black and water, because that will help you achieve grey tones. And you'll notice I'm only ever putting my paintbrush into the red tin once to extract the colour, and then I'm using water as I'm creating the different tones. The final colour is yellow. Make sure you've got a clean brush for yellow so that you can get that vibrant colour. Roll again your paintbrush onto the paint palette, take off that yellow tone, touch of water, and then you'll be able to create your lighter tones of yellow. So you're creating that range. So experiment creating your tonal jigsaw pieces first, and make sure that those are created in an orderly manner so that they can be easily presented. In order to create your first layer on the Liquorice Allsorts suite, you'll be creating the lightest tones in each of the sections. So the first thing you'll do is you'll take off the pink. Again, you're rolling your paintbrush into the paint palette, the red tin, and you're going to take off and place onto your colour swatch sheet the pink tone, and this is going to become what we call a paper palette. So you'll notice I'm adding water to this extracted paint, and I'm going to use that watered down paint to add my lightest tone. Now if, like on here, it goes on quite bright, just add water and just move that paint around the section so that you're filling the whole of that section which is pink on the reference image. Just fill it all with your lightest tone, and again taking some water over to my paper palette and just bringing the colour and moving it around and pushing the watered down ink around that section of the Liquorice Allsorts, and I'm just filling that section up. I clean my brush and I'll do exactly the same for green. So I'm using the lightest green, so that's the lightest tone I can see in the image, taking the colour off to create a paper palette, and I'm taking the watered down ink from the paper palette, not the red tin, from here on my paper palette, and I'm filling very neatly the whole of that section with a light green. So this is going to form what we call the base of the suite, and you'll do this throughout the whole of the image. Again, taking paint from the paper palette, not from the actual red tin. Extract the paint from the red tin onto your paper, because that will help you create a very watered down colour. The next one, I'm going to take the black Again, water it down as much as I can, so I'm adding water to my paper palette, and then I can get that really light tone. Now because the ink is watered down quite a lot, here you're going to be pushing the ink around that shape rather than painting back and forth as you normally would. So you're kind of pushing watered down ink into the sections to fill it up with that lightest tone. Use a tip of your brush as you're working into the very tight corners and just push that ink around to create that base tone. Again, the final colour is yellow, so if you can just make sure that you've got a very, very clean brush, get your yellow colour onto your paper palette, water it down and bring that colour into that bottom suite. So just a quick reminder, the colours go red, like a pinky red, and then green, grey and then yellow. So fill all of those up with those watered down colours. Now the licorice is what's in the centre, and at this stage you're going to fill the licorice with the lightest grey. So you've already taken black off, so use that same section of your paper palette and very, very lightly, with a very light grey, the lightest you can get, you're going to fill each of the licorice sections with a very light grey. So again, taking it from the extracted black paint on your paper palette and just fill that up to create your very, very lightest grey. Now all of these light tones within your Liquorice Allsorts suites, these are your base, so this is your light tone, and then you'll move on to dark tones and blend with medium to get the detail. Okay, so as soon as you've completed all 4 suites with the light tone, you must let it dry before you move on to the next section. The next step is to start to add your dark tones and blend in with medium. So on the pink suite you can see here I've added in the tones that are darker and blended them with medium to try and create a 3-dimensional shape. The areas that are incomplete on here are the licorice, which I'll do last, and then I'll be adding ink from a second palette just to heighten the colours, and that will be in the final stage. On the green section you can see that I've mapped out all of the dark tones but not yet blended all of them, so they're sat side by side, the light and the dark tones, those will be blended again at a later stage. So in order to create the darker pink tones, you will take off your pink colour. Again, you can work on your paper palette, taking the colours off so that you've got those colours available to you and they're not too harsh and not too light, so you can control them a lot better on your paper palette. You'll mark off all of your dark tones, so your dark and light tones will sit side by side. So you'll add all of the tones that you can see that are darker, but you won't blend them in at this stage. So you're adding them on top of that very, very light pink for this top suite, and you'll see once again they're sitting side by side. So they haven't been blended, they're sitting side by side. What you're doing at the moment is marking off where these tones go, how they sit on that suite, and how they will help create that 3-dimensional form and quality that you're wanting to achieve to create a realistic Liquorice Allsorts. Now to create the bit at the top where the tones are just slightly faded, I would add a little bit of a darker pink, take off some of the excess ink and water, and you can use your paper palette to do this, or you can just take off the excess water with your hands and just softly blend. If your paintbrush is too wet, it will move the paint too quickly, and if it's just damp, which is how you want it, it will just softly blend those colours together. So you don't want to mix them, you just want to softly blend them so you get that really gentle, very smooth effect at the edge. Okay, again you've got some more of these darker pinks at the bottom, so this is where the licorice is casting a little bit of a shadow on the pink. It's where they're joined together. Just mark it off, you don't have to blend it at this stage, you will blend it in a few minutes. Just mark off where all the dark tones go, and then what you'll be able to do is experiment blending them together with a very damp brush, not a wet brush, and just kind of mixing those in really smoothly to create that accurate detail and tone. Now remember, if your colours are not bright enough at this stage, later you will add some of the more vibrant colours from the other palette. So just get your tones on at this point. Don't worry if they're a little bit too light. Just try and get your accurate three-dimensional quality. So again, at this stage, you're just going to take off that excess water so that your brush is damp, and you're just going to soften the edges. So soften all of those dark edges. And as I said, if your paintbrush is too wet, and the dark tones are blending too quickly or moving too quickly, just try and take off the excess water. Use a tissue or a paper towel if you prefer, and that will help you as you're just drying off that brush so that the tones will move, and just soften at the edges so you're blurring and blending them in. So really gently at the edges, and I'm kind of rubbing the paintbrush just to soften those edges, just to create something that's less harsh and more like a sweet. You can start to see now the three-dimensional quality on the pink area. Now that will be repeated on each of the different sections, so I'll quickly talk you through the green just to explain exactly what you'll do. So you'll work with the darkest tone, so remember the darkest tone is actually a different shade of green on here. So take your dark green off your palette and place it on your paper palette, and then just mark off your darkest tones in green. So you'll see on here where the pink casts a shadow to create that three-dimensional quality. You've got this darker green edging down the sweet, creating the three dimensions on the green as well. Okay, so this form is created by mixing the two different shades of green to create, again, a three-dimensional quality. And this is the realistic quality that you want to achieve to make your painting accurate, to make it look like the image that you're working from. Now at this point as well, you'll then move on to your lighter green. And your light green will help you blend, help you create those medium tones. So around the edges, just soften with your other green. This is a lighter green. Some students in the past have said that they want to use yellow at this point as well, and that's absolutely fine. If you can see yellow in there and you want to try it, then have a little go. But use green to start with, and then you can always mix in the yellow at a later stage if you see that the colours need to be a little bit brighter. So all I'm doing now is just adding that lighter green around the edge, taking off the excess water and paint, and then I'll just blur the edges and soften them together. Okay, and this blurring of the edges is what will help you create that realistic sweet. Just try and make sure that you're keeping those light tones that you originally placed on your sweet, because you don't want to lose any of those. So the light tones are really important to help you keep that form and make it look, as we've said again, realistic. This will be repeated for each of the sweets in the same process. Okay, the final stage with the red tin of paint is to add the black for the licorice. So again, take off your paint and place that on your paper palette. And we're going to be working on top of the light tones, adding the dark tones. Now eventually you will get them jet black, leaving some areas white. And if at any stage you go over a section that's white, please don't worry, don't think that you need to start again. At this point we can add white acrylic over the top, so please don't worry. Just try your best to leave them, but if you do go over them, you don't need to start again. We can work on those at a later stage. So very neatly with the tip of your paintbrush, you're going to be painting in the sections that are jet black. So you're working with a very dark colour. You might find that when you first place it on to the section that you're working on, that it starts to dry and it's a little bit of a medium tone. That's okay, we can go over it again as soon as it's dry. Please don't go over it again and again while it's wet, because it will tear your paper. But just try and paint in and then leave the sections that you can see are a light grey or a white. So you're going to leave a little dash here. Just going to try and paint around that. Again, it's the tip of your brush, so use the tip of your brush to get in that detail, and you'll see on there it's just got a little line that goes through. Again, again, tip of your brush, take your black off, always place it on your paper palette so you've not got too much extra water on your brush, and then you'll be able to fill in again any of those gaps that will be the licorice, leaving sections white that you can see on the sweet. That's the light reflecting from it or onto it, and that's what's going to create that three-dimensional quality, that form that you want to achieve, so that you can create that realistic sweet. You can see here I'm going over the top of what dried as a grey, and I'm just neatening up that work that I've done and making it another shade darker, so it's jet black. Here I've just got one section that's white, so I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger than it should be, because if I make it bigger I can always go back and I can make it smaller. It is a little bit of a lighter grey here, so you might not want to do 2 layers of paint. Again, this is where the light is hitting the sweet, so just be aware of that. Look closely at your image and just check, does it need to go jet black, or do certain areas need to and other areas need to stay a bit lighter? So do look closely at your image. You'll find that the detail is slightly different in the licorice section, so do make sure that you're looking closely at your reference image and you're painting what you can see, not what you think is there. Okay, and that's really important to create that realism. Okay, so you'll notice that actually the tones are not solid black here, so do check those out. Again, this is something you'll repeat throughout the whole of the stack of sweets. Here you've got jet black again, so from the left hand side on the green sweet it's really dark, so you can start to add in a really strong black. Use the side of your brush to get a really neat edge. At the bottom down here it's slightly lighter, so what I'm doing is just using all of the paint on my brush, marking off where it is darker, touch of water. Use my paper palette just to take off that excess water, and then I can see now that I've got that lighter grey, and again I can blend and blur all of those colours together, and as long as I've got it light enough I can go back over it and make it darker if it should be. Keep those areas that are lighter as light as they need to be. So I've got a little bit of a darker shadow here which I can go over, and another darker shadow at the bottom. Make all of those as dark as they need to be. Again, making any areas jet black that are much darker, that are either shadowed or are just darker within that section. You can see they're really neat and creating that three-dimensional quality again. This is repeated then on the last 2 sweets for you to have the stack of sweets completed with the red tin, ready for the next stage, which you can add the more vibrant colours if needed, and also pencil crayon if needed as well.